Your father left you nothing but debt and that old Bible. That was what Raymond Cole told Clara May Whitaker 3 days after the funeral, standing on the porch of the little white farmhouse on Whitaker Road, with one hand on the door and the other holding a ring of keys that had once belonged to Clara's father. Clara was 19 years old. She stood in the yard with a paper grocery sack pressed against her hip. Inside it were 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a hairbrush, a photograph of her mother, and the cracked leather Bible her father had carried for as long as she could remember. Behind her, October leaves scraped across the dirt yard. In front of her, her uncle locked the only home she had ever known. Not a house he had built, not a house he had paid for. A house where Clara had learned to walk. A house where her mother had spent her final winter. A house where her father, Thomas Whitaker, had sat at the kitchen table every night with land records, tax receipts, sharpened pencils, and that old Bible open beside his coffee cup. Raymond turned the key slowly, like he wanted her to hear every click. Then he looked at her the way a man looks at a problem he has finally solved. "You're old enough to take care of yourself now," he said. Clara stared past him through the kitchen window. The curtains were still hanging crooked. Her father's chair was still beside the table. For a moment, she could almost see him there, one sleeve rolled up, pencil behind his ear, Bible near his elbow, asking her to read parcel numbers back to him from old yellow papers. When she was little, Clara had hated those winter nights. Her father would spread deeds, maps, tax receipts, and old courthouse copies across the table, then make her read the numbers aloud. "Book 41, page 318, he would say, and Clara would repeat it. "Parcel line follows North Ridge to Sycamore marker," and Clara would repeat that too. She never understood why it mattered. Her father would tap the paper and say, "A person can forget, a town can lie, but a number written right can outlive both." Now Raymond stood in front of that same house, holding those same keys, telling her there was nothing left. "My father said this place was ours," Clara said. Raymond gave a small laugh. Not loud, worse than loud. A quiet, dismissive laugh, like her grief was childish, and her memory was something he could brush off his sleeve. "Your father said a lot of things," he told her. "He also signed what he had to sign when the bills came due." Clara looked at him. "What does that mean?" Raymond's face hardened. "It means your father was drowning long before he died. Hospital bills, back taxes, banknotes. If I hadn't stepped in, the bank would have taken everything. My father never told me that." "Your father didn't tell you plenty." Then Raymond pointed at the Bible in her hand. "That's your inheritance. Take it and be grateful." Raymond thought the Bible was the only thing Thomas Whitaker had failed to protect. 3 weeks later, that same Bible would make him afraid to speak in front of the whole courthouse. By sundown, Clara May Whitaker had no home. By midnight, she was sleeping in the back seat of a broken 1974 Ford pickup behind Miller's gas station, wrapped in her father's denim jacket, holding his Bible against her chest, because it was the only thing in the world that still smelled like him. By the end of that week, everyone in Harlan County, Kentucky, believed the same story. Thomas Whitaker had lost the land. Thomas Whitaker had died owing more than he owned. Thomas Whitaker had left his daughter nothing. And Raymond Cole, with his clean coat, polished boots, and banker friends, had been the responsible brother who kept the mess from getting worse. That was how stories worked in small towns. The person with the loudest voice usually got to tell the first version, and if that version was repeated enough times at the feed store, the diner, the gas station, and church, people stopped calling it gossip. They started calling it history. Clara heard it everywhere. At Miller's gas station, where she washed her face in the restroom before work. At Darlene's diner, where she carried plates of eggs and biscuits to men who lowered their voices when she passed. At Whitaker Feed and Seed, where old farmers sat around the stove and talked about rain, cattle prices, and other people's failures. 4 days after Raymond locked her out, Clara walked into the feed store to ask for work. Anything. Sweeping floors, stacking feed, cleaning stalls, cleaning the back room. She would take cash, store credit, leftovers, whatever Mr. Hanley could give her. The bell above the door rang. Everyone looked. Then everyone looked away. That hurt more than staring. Clara walked to the counter with both hands folded in front of her. Mr. Hanley, the owner, was kind enough not to laugh and too afraid of Raymond to help. "Clara," he said softly, "I don't have anything right now." "I can work for cash," she said. "Just a few hours." Before Mr. Hanley answered, Bill Sutter spoke from beside the stove. "That girl's chasing the wrong kind of work." A few men chuckled. Clara turned. Bill was a cattleman with a red face, thick fingers, and a way of talking like every sentence had already been agreed on by God. "Your daddy spent his life chasing land he already lost," Bill said. "Don't make the same mistake." Clara felt her face go hot. "My father didn't lose everything." The room went quiet. Then Raymond Cole stepped out from the aisle where the seed corn was stacked. He had heard enough. He always seemed to appear when his version of the story needed protecting. "Clara," he said, almost gently, "don't embarrass yourself." She said nothing. Raymond looked at the men around the stove. "She's grieving. She thinks Tommy hid some grand secret from the world." A few of them smiled. Raymond shook his head. "There is no secret. There is no land. There is no money. Just an old Bible and a dead man's promises." Clara's throat tightened. Not because she believed him, because she was afraid other people might. She had no house key, no lawyer, no bank account, no deed, no proof, only the Bible in her hand and her father's voice in her memory. She turned and walked out of the feed store without another word. Behind her, someone muttered, "Poor thing," and somehow that hurt more than the laughter. That night, the rain came hard. Clara had finished a 10-hour shift at Darlene's diner, and Darlene had offered to let her sleep in the storage room, but Clara could not stand the thought of people knowing how far she had fallen. So she took a foil-wrapped piece of leftover meatloaf, walked back to the dead pickup behind Miller's gas station, and curled up across the back seat. The truck smelled like old vinyl, rust and gasoline. Rain ticked on the roof. Wind pushed through the cracked window seal. Clara pulled her father's denim jacket tighter around her shoulders and opened the Bible on her lap. Her father had not been a loud man. He did not argue at the feed store. He did not brag about what he owned. He did not correct every lie told about him. But he had rules, simple rules. Don't sign what you haven't read. Don't sell land in grief. Don't trust a man who smiles while counting your money. And the one Clara remembered most, don't sell what you don't understand. He had told her that when she was 12, sitting beside him in the old barn while rain hammered the tin roof and he sorted courthouse papers under a lantern. She had asked him why he kept so many records, tax receipts, survey maps, handwritten notes, old envelopes from the clerk's office, a green ledger wrapped with rubber bands. He had tapped the Bible beside him and said, "Because memory is good, but paper stands up in court." At the time, Clara had laughed. Court sounded like something from television, not something that belonged to farmers, feed stores, and families who still said a handshake meant something. Her father had not laughed. He only looked north toward the ridge. "There are people who will move your fence post," he said, "then ask you to prove where the fence used to be." A drop of rain landed on the Bible. Clara woke fully and grabbed it with both hands. "No, no, no," she whispered. She wiped the cover with her sleeve. The leather was cracked, but Clara had always been careful with it. Her father had carried that Bible to church, funerals, hospital rooms, and once even to the barn during a winter storm when a calf was born too weak to stand. She opened it to check the pages. A photograph slipped out. Her mother, Evelyn, standing under a sycamore tree, one hand raised against the sun. Clara smiled through tears. Then she noticed something strange. The back cover had warped from the rain. The leather had lifted near the inside seam. She pressed it flat. It rose again. There was something underneath. Clara sat up so fast her shoulder hit the truck door. She opened the door just enough for the weak dome light to come on, then ran her thumb along the inside edge of the back cover. The stitching was not original. It had been cut once and sewn back by hand. Not perfectly, carefully. Clara's heart began to pound. She took out her father's pocket knife, the one Raymond had not thought to take from her, and slid the blade beneath the loose seam. A thin brown edge of paper appeared under the leather. For a long moment she did not breathe. Then she pulled. A folded document slipped out and fell into her lap. It was old, brittle at the corners, folded into quarters, smelling faintly of dust and cedar. Across the top were the words, Warranty deed. Clara opened it slowly. The name typed in the center read, Thomas Elijah Whitaker. Below it, 12 acres, North Ridge Parcel, Harlan County, Kentucky. At the bottom, written in pencil so hard it had nearly cut the page, were her father's words. Clara, if they say I lost everything, go to the shack behind the sycamores. Use the small key under Matthew. Clara turned the Bible pages with shaking hands. Matthew, chapter 6. 2 pages had been glued together at the edges. She slid the knife between them. A tiny brass key fell into her palm. For the first time since her father died, Clara cried. Not because she had found land, not because she had found money, but because she knew one thing for certain. Her father had not forgotten her. Clara did not sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, she went to Darlene's diner, washed her face, tied back her hair, and worked another full shift carrying plates of eggs, biscuits, and black coffee to men who had no idea a deed was folded inside her coat pocket. Twice, she almost told Darlene. Darlene had been kind to her, in a hard, practical way. She let Clara sleep in the storage room when the rain got bad. She sent leftover food wrapped in foil. She never asked too many questions. But Clara heard her father's warning. Don't sell what you don't understand. So she said nothing. That evening, after her shift, Clara borrowed a flashlight from the diner's lost and found box, pulled on her father's denim jacket, and started walking north. The old Whitaker land looked different in the dark. Fences leaned, pastures had gone brushy. The farmhouse Raymond had locked sat black behind the walnut trees. Clara stayed off the road. She crossed the creek at the shallow bend and climbed toward the ridge where the sycamores stood. When she was little, her father had never let her go there alone. Snakes, he always said. But now Clara wondered if snakes had only been part of the truth. The ridge was rough country. Rock shelves pushed through the soil. Blackberry canes grabbed at her jeans. Dead leaves hid holes between roots. It was the kind of land men dismissed because it did not look useful from the road. After nearly an hour, Clara saw the first sycamore. Then another, white bark glowing in the last grey light. Behind them, nearly swallowed by vines, stood the shack. It was smaller than she expected. 1 room, rusted tin roof, warped boards, a narrow window covered from the inside. The front door hung crooked, but was held shut by a heavy padlock dark with age. For a moment, Clara just stood there. She could feel the deed inside her coat, the key in her fist, Raymond's voice in her head. There is no secret. There is no land. There is no money. Clara stepped forward. The little brass key looked too small for the lock. She slid it in. At first, nothing happened. She twisted harder. The lock resisted. Then, something inside gave way with a dry metallic click. The padlock opened. The sound seemed too loud in the trees. Clara pulled the door. It stuck. She put her shoulder against it and pushed. The door scraped across the floor and opened into darkness. The smell came first. Dust, old wood, mouse nests, machine oil, and cedar. Clara raised the flashlight. Inside the shack was not junk. It was order. A small table, 2 wooden shelves, a metal box under a chair, coffee cans labeled in her father's handwriting, a rolled county map tied with string, a green ledger sitting in the center of the table, and on top of the ledger was an envelope. Her name was written across it. Clara May. She walked to the table. Her fingers shook so badly she could barely open the envelope. Inside was a letter. The first line said, "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and Raymond has lied." Clara sat down on the dusty floor, and she read. The letter was 6 pages long. Thomas Whitaker had written it slowly, carefully, like a man who knew every sentence might someday have to defend his daughter. He told Clara that the original Whitaker farm had been divided after her grandfather died. Most of the land went into the family operation, but 12 acres on the North Ridge had been kept separate by Clara's grandmother, Ruth Whitaker. Ruth never trusted Raymond. Thomas wrote, "Your grandmother said Raymond had a way of wanting things before they belonged to him. When Clara's mother got sick, the hospital bills came fast. Thomas borrowed money. Then more money. He fell behind. Raymond offered to help. He brought papers to the kitchen table. He said he could protect the farm from the bank. He said it was only temporary. He said family had to trust family. Thomas signed some of it. Too much of it. By the time he understood what Raymond had done, the main farm was already in Raymond's control. But Raymond made one mistake. He thought Thomas was too broken to check the old records. The 12 acres on the North Ridge had never been part of the transfer. They still belonged to Thomas. And after Thomas died, they belonged to Clara. Clara turned to the green ledger. Every year, her father had paid the taxes on the ridge parcel in cash. Small amounts. Quietly. He had kept every receipt, every parcel number, every date, every clerk's initials. Clara remembered those numbers now. She remembered sitting at the kitchen table, reading them back to him while snow pressed against the windows. She had thought he was teaching her patience. Now she understood. He had been teaching her how not to be erased. The shack was not a hideout. It was a poor man's courthouse. Then Clara opened the metal box. Inside were more documents. Old tax receipts. A county survey map. A copy of Ruth Whitaker's estate division. Letters from a timber company. Letters from a land development company. And one folded carbon copy from the bank. That bank copy made Clara stop. It was dated 9 years earlier. It showed that Raymond had asked whether the North Ridge parcel could be included as collateral in a loan package. At the bottom, a handwritten note from a bank officer read, "North Ridge parcel not in Raymond Cole's name. Separate title remains with Thomas E. Whitaker." Raymond had known. He had known the land was not his. He had known before Clara's father died. Clara felt something cold move through her chest. Not shock. Understanding. Raymond had not simply misunderstood. He had lied. Then, Clara unrolled the county map. Her flashlight moved across faded property lines. The 12-acre parcel sat north of the old farm, rough and unimpressive at first glance. But one red pencil line changed everything. An old access road ran from the county road, across the ridge parcel, and into a larger tract of timber beyond it. Beside the line, Thomas had written, "Original right-of-way recorded 1941. Not abandoned. Still attached to ridge parcel." Now the letters from the development company made sense. Raymond had promised them clear access to the ridge, a haul road, timber movement, future development, but the only legal access crossed Clara's land. Thomas had known, Raymond had known, and Clara had been sleeping in a broken pickup while men negotiated over land that legally belonged to her. She read the last paragraph of her father's letter. "I could not beat Raymond with money. I could not beat the bank with pride. So I kept the proof. If they try to make you feel small, remember this. Land does not care who laughs loudest. It belongs to who can prove the line." Clara folded the letter carefully. Then she packed the deed, ledger, map, tax receipts, bank copy, development letters, and her father's letter into his old canvas satchel. Before leaving, she looked around the shack one last time. For years, the town had believed Thomas Whitaker had nothing left. But inside that locked room, he had left his daughter something no one expected from a poor man. A paper trail. The next morning, Clara went to the courthouse. Not to accuse anyone. Not yet. She went to ask questions. The Harlan County Courthouse was a red brick building, with worn steps and a clock that had been 10 minutes slow since before Clara was born. Inside, the records office smelled like paper, floor polish, and old heat. Behind the counter sat Mrs. Evelyn Harper, the county clerk. She was 71, with silver hair pinned tightly and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Clara placed the deed on the counter. Mrs. Harper looked at the paper, then at Clara, then back at the paper. "Where did you get this?" "My father's Bible." Mrs. Harper did not smile. She put on her glasses. For the next 40 minutes, she pulled books from shelves, checked indexes, traced parcel numbers, and wrote notes on a yellow legal pad. Clara stood with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles hurt. Once, Mrs. Harper called out a number. "Book 41, page 318. Clara answered before she could stop herself. "North Ridge parcel." Mrs. Harper looked up. "You know these records." "My father made me read them back to him when I was little." Mrs. Harper's expression softened just a little. "Then he taught you well." Finally, the old clerk closed the last book. "This deed appears valid," she said. Clara's knees nearly gave way. Mrs. Harper looked through the tax receipts. "Your father paid taxes every year." "He did. All the way through last year." Clara whispered. Then it's mine. Mrs. Harper looked at her carefully. I am not a judge, child, but from what I see, this parcel was never transferred to Raymond Cole. Before Clara could answer, the door behind her opened. Alden Pierce walked in. The banker. Tall, narrow, grey suit, face calm enough to make cruelty look like paperwork. He saw Clara, then the deed, then the ledger. Then he smiled. Miss Whitaker, he said, I heard you were asking about land records. Mrs. Harper's eyes narrowed. This is a records office, Mr. Pierce. People ask about records here. Pierce chuckled. Of course. He turned to Clara. Your uncle is worried about you. He says you may have found some old papers and misunderstood them. Clara held the ledger closer. I understand enough. Pierce lowered his voice. Old deeds can be complicated. Boundaries change. Taxes get confused. A young woman in your position could spend years chasing something that won't hold up. My position? Clara asked. Pierce glanced at her worn coat, then at her shoes, then at the canvas satchel. You need stability, he said, not a fight. That afternoon, Raymond came to the diner. Clara was wiping down the counter after lunch when he walked in and sat at the end stool like he owned it. Darlene watched from the kitchen window. Raymond placed an envelope on the counter. What's that? Clara asked. $2,000. Clara stared at it. Raymond leaned forward. You sign a quitclaim. You stop digging through old papers. You move on with your life. $2,000 for land you said didn't exist. His face tightened. It doesn't exist in any way that matters to you. The diner went quiet. Raymond pushed the envelope closer. You are sleeping in storage rooms and dead trucks, Clara. Don't act proud. Pride is what killed your father. For 1 second, she wanted the money. Not because she trusted him, because she was tired. Tired of being cold, tired of eating leftovers, tired of feeling like poverty made her easier to erase. Then she remembered the words in her father's Bible. Don't sell what you don't understand. She pushed the envelope back. Raymond smiled, but there was fear under it now. You really are Tommy's girl, he said. Clara looked him in the eye. I hope so. 2 weeks later, the truth stopped being private. The Land Development Company scheduled a public filing meeting at the courthouse to finalize access agreements for the Ridge Road. Most people in town did not understand every legal detail, but they understood money. A new haul road meant jobs, timber contracts, gravel hauling, equipment rentals, county fees. Raymond had been walking around town for months, like a man whose lie had finally turned profitable. He told the developer there were no title problems. He told the bank the deal would clear his debts. He told the feed store crowd that Clara was waving around old paper because grief had made her foolish. By the morning of the meeting, half the town had heard some version of it, so when Clara walked toward the courthouse carrying her father's Bible, people noticed. Bill Sutter saw her from his truck. Mr. Hanley saw her from the feed store doorway. 2 waitresses from Darlene's diner saw her crossing the square. By the time she reached the courthouse steps, people had begun following at a distance. Not to support her, not yet. They followed because small towns can smell a public humiliation before it happens, and most of them thought the humiliation would be hers. The meeting was held in the county records room because the commissioner's room was being painted. There were folding chairs along the wall, a long oak table in the center. Raymond sat at one end with Alden Pierce beside him. Across from them sat 2 men in suits from Lexington and a local attorney named Mr. Keene. Mrs. Harper sat near the record books with her notary stamp and a stack of old files. Clara stood outside the door for nearly a full minute. She wore her cleanest blouse, her father's denim jacket, her mother's small silver cross. In her arms, she carried the Bible. In the canvas satchel were the deed, ledger, tax receipts, county map, bank copy, development letters, and her father's 6-page letter. When she stepped inside, Raymond looked up. At first, he smiled. Then he saw the Bible. His smile faded. Clara, he said loudly, this is not the time. One of the developers looked at her. Who is this? Raymond sighed. My niece. She's been having a hard time since her father passed. A few people had gathered in the hallway now. Clara could feel them behind her. Men from the feed store. Darlene from the diner. A deputy. 2 courthouse clerks. People who had heard Raymond laugh at her. People who had heard others call her poor thing. Clara walked to the table. Her hands were cold, but they did not shake. "I own the North Ridge parcel," she said. The room went still. Raymond laughed. That same small laugh. The one from the porch. The one from the feed store. The one that said she was not worth taking seriously. "Clara," he said, "you do not own anything involved in this agreement." She opened the Bible and placed it on the table. Then she unfolded the deed. The old paper made a soft cracking sound. "This was behind the cover of my father's Bible." Alden Pierce leaned forward. "That document has not been authenticated." Mrs. Harper spoke before Clara could. "I reviewed the deed 2 weeks ago." Everyone turned to her. Raymond's face changed, just slightly, but Clara saw it. Mrs. Harper stood, walked to the shelf, and pulled down a deed book so heavy it landed on the table with a thud. She opened it to a marked page. "I also reviewed the recorded parcel." Mr. Keene adjusted his glasses. "And?" Mrs. Harper looked at Clara, then at Raymond. "The North Ridge parcel was conveyed to Thomas Elijah Whitaker through Ruth Whitaker's estate. I find no record of transfer to Raymond Cole." Raymond stood. "That parcel was part of the family restructuring." Mrs. Harper did not blink. "Not in the recorded documents," Pierce said. "There may be subsequent filings." Mrs. Harper slid the tax receipts across the table. Taxes were paid yearly by Thomas Whitaker, in cash. Receipts matched the parcel number. One of the developers picked up the map. "What about the access road?" Clara opened her father's ledger to the marked page. "My father wrote that the original right-of-way was attached to the Ridge parcel." Mr. Keene took the ledger, then the map, then the deed. The room waited. Paper moved. A chair creaked. People in the hallway leaned closer. Finally, the attorney looked at Raymond. "We may have a title problem." Raymond's face flushed. "There is no problem. This is an old misunderstanding." Clara reached into the satchel and took out the bank copy. "This is from 9 years ago." Alden Pierce's face went pale before anyone even read it. Clara placed it on the table. "It says the North Ridge parcel was not in Raymond's name." Mr. Keene picked it up. The developer leaned over his shoulder. Mrs. Harper read the note aloud. "North Ridge parcel not in Raymond Cole's name. Separate title remains with Thomas E. Whitaker." The hallway went silent. Clara looked at Raymond. "You knew." Raymond did not answer. Then Clara looked at Alden Pierce. "And you knew who had written it down." For the first time that day, the banker had nothing polished to say. He lowered his eyes to the table. Clara took the tiny brass key from the Bible and placed it beside the deed. The little key caught the courthouse light like it had been waiting 19 years for that table. "This key opened the shack on the ridge," Clara said. "That is where my father kept the records." Raymond slammed his palm on the table. "That is enough." Mrs. Harper's voice cut through the room. "Mr. Cole, sit down." He did, slowly. Clara unfolded the last page of her father's letter. She did not read all of it, only the line that mattered. "My father wrote, if they say I lost everything, make them read the deed." No one laughed. Not Raymond, not Pierce, not the men in suits, not the people in the hallway. Then the developer asked the question that finished it. "If Mr. Cole does not own the access road, who does?" Mrs. Harper looked at the record, then at Clara. "She does." For 5 seconds, there was no sound at all. No whispers, no papers, no footsteps, just the silence of a whole town realizing it had believed the wrong man. And in that silence, Clara finally understood what her father had done. He had not left her rich. He had left her undeniable. Raymond did not apologize that day. Men like Raymond rarely apologize while the room is still full. He gathered his papers, said the matter would be reviewed, and walked out without looking at Clara. Alden Pierce followed behind him, slower than usual. He kept his job at the bank, but he never again said Thomas Whitaker's name in public without lowering his voice. By Friday morning, the story had reached the feed store. By Friday afternoon, it was at the diner. By Sunday, people at church were saying Thomas Whitaker's name differently. Not loudly, not dramatically, just differently, as if a stain had been lifted from it. A week later, the developer's attorney contacted Clara directly. This time, no one called her confused. No one called her grieving. No one called her homeless. They called her Miss Whitaker. The offer they made was more money than Clara had ever seen written on one page. But she did not sell the land. Not all of it. She signed a limited access agreement, with conditions her new attorney helped her understand. The road could be used. The spring could not be touched. The shack would remain hers. The parcel would remain in the Whitaker name. Part of the payment went to legal fees. Part went into savings. Part went to repairing the old shack. And part went to buying back enough of the lower pasture to put a fence where her father always said the fence belonged. That winter, Clara moved out of the diner storage room and into the ridge shack. It was not much at first. A wood stove, a repaired roof, 2 new windows, a narrow bed, a kitchen table bought second-hand from a church rummage sale. But it was hers. On the wall, she hung the county map. Beside it, she placed her father's Bible on a small shelf. Not locked away, not hidden, open. People came by sometimes. Not many at first. Darlene came with curtains. Mr. Hanley from the feed store came with fence staples and would not take money for them. Mrs. Harper came with a clean certified copy of the deed in a blue folder. Bill Sutter, the cattleman who had mocked her, stopped his truck at the gate one afternoon and sat there so long Clara finally walked out. He removed his hat. "I was wrong about your daddy," he said. Clara looked at him. Then she said, "Yes, sir, you were." He nodded. That was all. And somehow, that was enough. Raymond left Harlan County the following spring. Some said he moved to Tennessee. Some said the bank pressed him after the development deal changed. Some said he still claimed Clara had ruined him. Clara never answered those stories. She had learned from her father that silence could be stronger than explanation, as long as you had the paper to stand on. Years passed. The ridge shack changed slowly. First a porch, then a gravel drive, then a garden, then a cedar sign at the gate, Whitaker Ridge. Every October, on the anniversary of the day Raymond locked her out, Clara walked to the sycamore trees and remembered the night she opened the shack. She remembered the rain on the truck roof, the tiny brass key in her palm, the deed folded behind the Bible cover, and the way her father's handwriting had reached her when no one else would. Over time, people stopped calling it the shack. They called it the Bible house. Not because Clara asked them to, because stories name places better than people do. And this story stayed. It stayed at the feed store. It stayed in the courthouse. It stayed in the diner, where Darlene told new waitresses never to judge a girl by the coat she wears or the Bible she carries. And it stayed in the Whitaker family, where every child learned one rule before they were old enough to understand it. Don't sell what you don't understand. Clara never became rich in the way people in suits measure wealth. She did not build a mansion. She did not buy a new truck every year. She did not turn the ridge into a subdivision. She kept the spring clean. She kept the sycamores standing. She kept the Bible on the shelf. And inside the back cover, where the deed had once been hidden, she placed a copy of her father's final line. Land does not care who laughs loudest. It belongs to who can prove the line. People in Harlan County once said, Thomas Whitaker left his daughter nothing. They said it because they measured inheritance in cash. They said it because they believed a poor man's silence meant failure. They said it because Raymond Cole had a clean coat, a bank officer beside him, and the loudest voice in the room. But Thomas Whitaker left Clara something stronger than money. He left her a Bible with a secret in its cover, a deed with her future written in old ink, a key pressed beneath Matthew, a shack no one thought mattered, a map no one bothered to read, a paper trail no one expected a poor man to keep, and a truth no one could laugh away once it was placed on the courthouse table. The men who mocked Clara thought she was homeless because she had no roof. But they were wrong. She had a home before she ever opened that shack. It was waiting for her in 12 forgotten acres, in her father's handwriting, in the proof he protected when he could not protect anything else. That is why the story still gets told, because sometimes the world looks at a person with empty pockets and decides they have nothing. But poverty is not the same as emptiness. A quiet father can leave a fortune without leaving a dollar. A forgotten shack can hold more power than a courthouse full of men. And a girl with no place to sleep can still walk into a room carrying the one thing arrogance fears most: proof.